Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to talk about why some of your favorite altcoins may or may not break their previous all-time high. We're going to talk about a lot of these factors that'll go into it, such as tokenomics, inflation rates, token unlocks, circulating supply, FTVs. We'll talk about everything. We'll talk about that good stuff and kind of why it's important. Okay? Because in reality, this is what's going to help you kind of decide different price points for coins, different price targets, which kind of is going to overall help you out with your goals. Okay. If that sounds good, guys, stay tuned. Let's get right to this thing. So got a lot of questions regarding it, just talking about the last video. This is something that's kind of all over the place. It's really hard to say for sure what's going to happen, right? But typically, a lot of people, when they're coming up with price predictions, they're looking at previous all-time highs. They're looking at it like, okay, back in the day it went up to this price. If I think the total market cap supply of crypto is going to double, then in theory that all-time high should double. To me, I think the more important metric is looking at the market cap of that coin. Okay, the reason I'm saying that is because one thing a lot of people do not factor in are the inflation rate, the tokenomics of said coin, right? Because to keep in mind that crypto works in what, 4-year cycles. A lot of coins can come into circulation in those 4 years that will drastically affect the potential of its price. Okay, certain coins are not very inflationary, others are extremely inflationary. Some coins already have a lot of the circulating supply out, other coins don't have anything, right? So we're going to talk about it. We'll look at a lot of different examples just so it kind of makes more sense, okay? So we're going to start off with just some examples of just because it did hit a certain high doesn't mean it's going to happen again, right? So you can't look at every coin and like, oh yeah, I'm going to go for this coin because I think that's going to happen, right? And a good example here is like Dash, for example. A lot of the examples we're going to see that this happened to, it's like legacy coins that didn't get adoption. So that's why a big thing for me, a big narrative, a big thing throughout the bear market, and the big reason we're so big into Sol is for adoption. That's the key thing I wanted to see this cycle. And so far, we're definitely getting it, right? So Dash, for example, if we look at the all-time chart back in 2017, it did hit up to about 1,500 bucks. In the 20 to 21 cycle, definitely underperformed. Didn't even hit $500. Okay, so this is one that was a top coin at one point. Not so much now, and a lot of it just has to do with adoption. It's been around for so long, it's not necessarily getting utilized. That doesn't mean it won't ever, right? That doesn't mean that something can't happen where it can get utilized or it can get popular. It's just we're playing a game of kind of stacking your bets as to which one is most likely to do that. You're playing a game of probability, essentially. When I see things like this, and I see not too many people talking about it, the mining aspect is also kind of deadish. Doesn't give me a lot of confidence in it doing too well. Okay. Another example of this is going to be like Zcash, for example. Okay. When look at the overall price chart, you can see the kind of drastic difference. In the 2018 actually is when it hit their high. Under $1,000 in the 2021 cycle, barely struggled to get around 300 bucks. Okay, pretty big difference, right? But one key difference, and this is something you kind of really got to pay attention to, is why we look at the market caps, right? When we look at Dash, for example, we can definitely see the difference in prices. When we look at the market caps, we can see the inflation does seem to be fairly consistent because it's consistent here. Kind of a different story when we look at Zcash, right? So we're looking at Zcash, when we look at their market cap, look at the difference. Okay, so although it didn't break its previous all-time high in terms of coin price, it definitely obliterated it in terms of overall market cap. Why? It's because of more coins coming into the supply. As more coins come in, it's just going to take more capital to increase that overall price, right? So it's important to pay attention to the inflation rate of that coin. Is it a deflationary coin? Are there any deflationary mechanics coming out? These are types of things that factor in, and this is what can lead to things like this, right? So this is why it's important to look at those tokenomics, look at any unlocks, look at the inflation rates, look at how things are changing, just because that can definitely have a massive effect on things, right? This is a very stark example of why it's important to look at those things, right? And to me, why market cap to me is a better predictor of what may end up happening, right? Monero is another one that didn't break it. It got pretty damn close though. In reality, when we look at price, It did hit over $500 in 2017, and then in 2021, right under 500 bucks, right? Currently, doing pretty damn good. It did hit over $400 already, so chances are it may break both of those previous all-time highs. Interesting though, when we look at the market cap, you can see the 2021 cycle did go a little bit higher, right? So kind of one of those things to factor in. Just trying to give some examples. Very few coins so far have broken their previous all-time high in terms of altcoins, right? We're going to focus here on altcoins just because Bitcoin's a whole different thing. Solana being one of the very few, right? Didn't break it by much, but it did go beyond it, right? Previous all-time high was around 259 bucks. It did crack over 260, right? 262, I think 269 is where I ended up hitting it. But it did break it. But when we look at the market cap again, because again, it's a highly inflationary coin because of the staking rewards, its market cap, pretty significant difference here, right? In the 2021 cycle, right under 80 billion, right? So about 77 billion versus in that earlier peak, it did hit over 125 billion, right? So it is a significant increase. And it's just because of those factors, right? And just because it hit that point doesn't mean like, okay, it already hit beyond it. I don't think it's going to go too much beyond that. A lot of things can happen. Narratives happen. Overall adoption, like this is one. Why it's done so well has just been getting a lot of use. And this is a big reason why we're so bullish on it. Why? Because they make it extremely easy to use. All the dApps, all the interfaces, all the GUIs, they make it very newbie friendly. Like if I'm introducing somebody to crypto, this is one of those that's a good one to introduce to just because, again, it's so easy, it's so fast, it's on every exchange. It's just one of the easiest ones, and that's why it continues to do so well, right? It's easy to understand. It doesn't have all these complicated use cases, complicated layer 2s and all this stuff. Everything is on Sol. It's easy to use. The wallets are easy to use. They put a huge emphasis on that, and it's definitely been paying off. Okay, so adoption is definitely going to be a big one. One thing you do got to understand though is I know a lot of people are very tribalistic with their coins. That's something I would suggest not to be, right? Although I do definitely have my favorites, that doesn't mean I'm like ride or die with a lot of them, right? If I see something change that I'm not a big fan of, I have no issue dumping that coin. For you guys who follow those portfolio videos, I've seen that time and time again. Sometimes the tokenomics change, or the team made a bad decision, or they didn't do something about something. And we kind of dumped our bags and we went with the coins where we have higher confidence. As this market has like matured, so has our vision, right? We've seen time and time again, and for me at least, it's become a little bit clear which coins I kind of think are going to do the best here. Okay. At the same time, you got to be realistic of why that coin is likely to pump. Okay. In Sol's case, it's adoption. Some of my favorite like proof of work coins that are like ASIC mineable coins, a lot of it has to do with the ASIC side, with the hardware manufacturers potentially pumping those coins. You gotta be realistic. Like, even though the fundamentals are good in some of those, and I like it, I like the team, I like whatever, a lot of the times it's kind of those influences that to me kind of make it fare better in terms of having good price action. One good example, and this one definitely pissed a lot of people off, right? My take on ETC did not sit well with a lot of people, and that's fine. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. But for me, I'm looking at it based off of being a person who was here last cycle and seeing the narrative, like talking to the normies, the friends who got in as to why the hell they bought Ethereum Classic, which as a miner, I was like, why the hell? But a lot of it did have to do with newbies coming in and the confusing aspect as to what's the difference between ETC and like Ethereum. Last cycle, for example, a lot of these popular apps that newbies are going to use, like Robinhood and such, only had a certain amount of coins, right? At one point, I think they only had 5 coins, ETC, surprisingly, being one of them. So what would happen? People would start getting into crypto. They have their little Robinhood app. They see Ethereum at $4,500, and they see this thing called Ethereum Classic at only a couple $100. They're going to be more likely to jump into it for that reason. That, to me, was definitely a narrative, because trust me, I talked to normie after normie, and that is a primary reason as to why the hell they even bought this thing. Okay? So I get it. A lot of people don't like that, and they're ride or die with ETC, which is fine. I hope it's going to do well, but you have to be realistic as to why it's going to pump. Okay, another reason we've talked about before also is because who owns a huge stake of ETC? It's DCG, which is the parent company of Grayscale, for example, which is owned by Barry Silbert. Here's another big reason. It did pump last cycle. At one point, he had like 10% of the overall supply. And this is the reason that Grayscale does have an ETC trust, is because of him and his investments there. Now, they didn't have a very good bear market, got into a lot of trouble. They did sell off a lot of their Grayscale ETC trust shares. So that may not be a huge factor, right? And also the whole thing we talked about earlier with people confusing Ethereum, ETC and such, it may not be a big factor either, because things like Robinhood have a lot more cryptos now. Also, the narrative is kind of changing, especially towards more Solana type things. Okay, so this is why I'm not super bullish on ETC. I want it to do well because, again, I am a fan of the ASICs, the ETC and ETH ASICs. But realistically, to me, those are the big drivers, and neither one kind of look too great there. People will argue it. Like, I get it. A lot of people got butthurt with those comments last time. But like I told them, okay, well, show me the data as to why you think it's going to do well. Okay, and when you look at the data, this to me is what's telling. So if you're looking up coins, and especially any of these coins, a good metric to go by is on-chain data, right? An easy way to aggregate it, look at it, DeFi Llama. Makes it very easy to look at snapshots of all kinds of different chains, and it kind of gives you the idea of how much it's getting utilized. Okay, ETC is not a new coin. It has been around a long time. It's out of that speculation phase. A lot of people tend to prefer coins that they're going to be their first bull market, just because, again, there's going to be price discovery. There's no previous bag holders. There's a lot of good reasons, especially if it's a coin that does get hype, for it to do well. In this case, when we look at ETC's actual use case, it's not looking very good, right? And this is why I'm not so hot on it. Okay, TVL 285,000. Another big telling is how much it's actually getting utilized. When you look at the chain fees for 24 hours, $23 freaking dollars. Okay, that is not a good sign. If you're a person who's bullish on it because of the fundamentals, people building on it, this is not what you want to see, right? Which is why, again, my biggest thing, the biggest drivers are kind of some of these other factors. Okay, especially when compared to other coins, right? Just so we can get a ballpark of, like, because in reality, if you have nothing to compare this to, you're like, okay, well, 285,000 is a good amount of money. But for example, with Ethereum, which is a much newer coin, has $1.6 million locked up. Okay, Ergo's been around a little bit longer, $3.76 million locked up. This one also is a little bit concerning just because, again, it has been around for so long, right? So use case is starting to go up a little bit, but again, I would like to definitely see more use case of people actually utilizing the chain for what it's for, right? Especially for these more legacy coins, because again, there's going to be a lot of previous bag holders who round trip that thing from last cycle, and those are things that are going to hinder it. But if it's getting that adoption, it's getting that hype, it has those pumpamentals, a lot of that stuff's kind of out the window. Right, and again, for comparison's sake, just so we can compare it to the big boy so we can see why it's a big discrepancy. When we look at the big dog for TVL, Ethereum, 64 billion locked up, okay, which is massive. Especially even things like Solana, which we think like, oh yeah, Solana's taking over. They have a lot of catching up to do still. Even as big as they are, how much they've been taking the market, it's only $9.3 billion worth. Okay, now can it take a big chunk of that? I personally think it will. Okay, one telling thing here is just on-chain activity, right? Look at the chain fees over 24 hours. Okay, Ethereum, again, 64 billion. Solana is a fraction of that. When we look at the chain revenue, including the MEVs, it's about 3.25 million. When we look at Solana, again, being a sixth of that, generating just about as much fees, that's bullish. Okay, that means it's getting used. That means people are actually transacting on it. Between all the different dApps, which there is a ton of that have a lot of TVL going. Okay, and I see this momentum continuing to increase and see it taking part of Ethereum's pie. Okay, we'll see if that plays out, but this is a good way to kind of compare. And this is also a reason that was getting me kind of like, I like AVAX. I like what they're doing. I'm just not a fan of the tokenomics, right? What is the incentive to buy that AVAX, right? With Solana, it's pretty clear. Whether you're degenning on NFTs, on memes, you want to do liquid staking, you want to do DeFi, you're buying that Solana to participate in those things. If there's not a flywheel going that kind of forces you to buy that coin, or there's a reason for you to buy that coin, you're not necessarily going to, and that may cause issues with price action, right? And that's a big reason we kind of got bearish on AVAX. They're doing a lot of good things. I love the projects that are on there. On the gaming side especially, they are big. The issue is there's not enough of a reason for people to actually buy AVAX other than speculation. Okay, their whole gimmick, their whole mechanic is people building layer 1s on AVAX, but not on AVAX, them building their own layer 1. Not having to purchase AVAX, which to me, when that whole thing happened, like that kind of got me not too happy. You can definitely see the trend. Look at the chain revenue in comparison, freaking $7,000. Okay, again, it's because there's no reason to buy AVAX, even though, for example, I'm super bullish on like Off the Grid, which is built on AVAX, but it has its own layer 1. You don't have to buy AVAX to necessarily interact with that layer 1. Versus if you want to interact with dApps and Solana, you gotta buy that Solana. Okay, and that's why I like it, because everything, there's no layer 2s, which is another big drawback for Ethereum, and I think this is going to be the big difference, is that a lot of everything going on with ETH is on the layer 2s, right? You don't have that. You have all the value being accrued on Solana. This is also a big reason why I'm big on Caspa, and why the speed is essential, is that so everything can be on that layer 1. People are talking about this hype with layer 2s, like I would be more bearish if that's going to be a big part of the thing, unless it's a specific use case. If it's ZKPs, which it seems like what they're going to, that's one thing, but I don't want to see all these different layer 2s, because they just become like parasites of the layer 1. We can clearly see that with ETH. Okay, I'd rather have just all the value accrual, all the values just all be on that layer 1. Okay, so these are the types of things I look at and try to consider, which aren't necessarily everything, right? Again, a lot of it, reality, hype, marketing, pumpamentals, who's shilling it. As we've seen time and time again, a lot of times that's more important than even the basic fundamentals, right? All those things play into it, but at the end of the day, during that crazy blow off top, a lot of times that's a bigger factor, right? A lot of these VC coins, etc., etc. These are just all things to kind of factor in, right? And then kind of talking on the tokenomics side, again, one big thing I like to focus on, again, is the market cap. If we're looking at previous price points, I tend to look at market cap more, right? So there are certain coins that are even smaller coins that did have quite the run up this bear market, to the point where they broke, or damn near broke, previous all-time highs, not necessarily in terms of price, but overall market cap. Nervos being one of those. Okay, this is one that did a 10x kind of out of nowhere in early 2024 because of that whole layer 2 narrative with BTC, right? It blew up pretty massively. Price-wise, didn't break the previous all-time high, but market cap-wise, it definitely did. You can see it was a hefty, hefty difference. So chances are, if we do pump and we go back up to these prices, I don't think it's necessarily going to go a ton higher than this, just because it's already a good amount. Previously it went over, right over $1 billion, and then it went up to about 1.4 billion during that peak, right? Which is already a hefty increase over the previous all-time high in terms of market cap, which is what I tend to look at more than anything. Okay, because again, you have to factor in tokenomics, inflation rates, because a lot of these coins, especially newer coins, proof of stake coins, a lot of bullshit Ponzi tokenomics with a lot of them. Okay, so you have to be able to like see through them. One of the best examples last cycle was Illuvium. Okay, it came out super FOMO with this thing just because of the hype and everything going on with it. The issue was, at the time though, during the peak of the cycle, there weren't that many coins out in the circulating supply. So because of that, what happened with all the FOMO, price went freaking batshit crazy. It got up to freaking over $1,700. Okay, this coin is now $14. And a lot of it just had to do with not that many coins being out in circulating supply. So this is why when a coin is like that, it's new, you want to look at the fully diluted valuation, which is the current price of the coin multiplied by the current circulating supply, or the overall supply for the FTV, right? Fully diluted, as if though all the coins were out, because the market cap is just whatever is circulating times it by the price. Okay, but if we don't have that metric, like, it's hard to judge, and there's not that many coins circulating, FTV is definitely a good metric to pay attention to, right? Because as you can see here, like, the price is abysmal compared to what it was, but when we look at it in terms of market cap, pretty drastic difference. Why? And it's because a lot more coins got unlocked and went into the supply. So looking at this, people would look at it like, oh man, it's only 14 bucks. It used to be freaking $1,700. I'm bullish on it. I like the game. I think it's going to do well. There's zero chance it's going to hit those highs just because of the overall coins in supply now. and the overall market cap. You need to understand those things because, like, for example, if we look at the market cap, during this time, it was about 1.1, 1.2 billion. Currently, it's about 100 million, right? So let's say it reaches a billion. A 10x from here to reach close to this previous market cap is only going to bring you to about 140 bucks, which would be insane if it went, but nowhere near the damn near $1,700, right? And it's because of the amount of coins in supply now. So this is something we see with a lot of newly released coins, that they only release a certain amount of coins in order to kind of bring up the FOMO, bring up the price, and this is typically what you kind of see after, right? So it's important to pay attention to the tokenomics, how many coins are out, how many coins are circulating, and even if a coin's been out, like it's not just been out a few months, like how many coins are getting unlocked, right? Kind of a similar story with Honey and the Hive Mapper token. If we look at the price, kind of people are thinking the same thing, and I've seen this in the comments, I've argued it with people, kind of saying the same thing, like, oh man, it's under 3 cents, it was at freaking 32 cents back in January 2024, and that's a bear market high. Imagine if it goes up way higher than that, it's easily going to hit X price. Not so fast, right? A lot of that pump had to do with a similar situation. There weren't as many coins in supply, there's a lot more now. A good telltale is, again, look at the market cap comparison. See how it looks drastically different. If it looks pretty much the same when you're clicking on each, you can kind of tell that the supply is slowly coming out. You still want to look at unlocks, you still want to look at the tokenomics, but that kind of gives you a better idea. But when you click on the market cap, you can see it's a drastically different situation. Because if we look at the price, let's look at the December high, because at this point there weren't that many coins out. December 12th, it was 28 cents. Okay? The market cap at that time, though, again, was freaking under 60 million. Current market cap right now is double that. Okay? Like, it's, again, there weren't that many coins in supply, and that's what kind of caused that. Okay, because currently right now, for us to hit these prices again, for it to hit even just 28 cents, for it to 10x from here, it'd have to hit 10x from its current price, it'd have to hit over $1 billion market cap. Okay, which is possible, right? But at that point, it's definitely more difficult. So it's definitely not as easy as saying this when you look at the overall market cap. Again, it has to do with the amount of coins that are on supply. And this is one that did get affected by the FTX situation, where there was a lot of forced selling, kind of similar to the whole Atlas thing. There were a lot of SPL tokens that got affected by that. Honey was actually one of those, for you guys who are following that. Okay, so just again, understand those things, look at those things, and then just because it does have a lot of tokens on supply doesn't mean it's not going to do well, right? At the end of the day, hype, narrative can do crazy freaking things. One I've mentioned before had horrible tokenomics last cycle was Gala. It's still pumped like freaking crazy. Okay, this is another one. A lot of coins came out, so you can see the drastic difference. We're looking at price and market cap. But even just price-wise, right? So October 2021, it was like 10 cents, right? October, around that time, 10 cents. Market cap at that time was still $600 million, right? So this isn't like a little $10 million shitter, right? At this point, already a pretty hefty coin. Within the matter of days, again, November 8th, it was under 10 cents. By November 28th, 71 cents. Okay, that's how crazy things can get, even with horrible ass tokenomics, right? It's just hype, what narrative. At this point, it was VCs, interest, unlocks, a lot of shenanigans, right? And this happens over and over. It happens quite a bit. So you have to kind of understand the possibility of those coins. You can look at previous cycles and look at maybe a comparable narrative, maybe a comparable coin at that time. Like, okay, what kind of market cap did that coin reach last cycle, to kind of give you a ballpark as to what to expect. We do that with a lot of price comparisons, especially with like proof of work coins, GPU coins. My favorite one I like to use and compare to is actually Raven coin, right? Raven coin is one of those coins that is very community based. Doesn't really do a whole lot, not necessarily a hype coin, but when we look at what it's done previously, this is what kind of gives you like, oh man, okay, I can definitely see a possibility with some of these other coins, right? In 2021, their peak, they reached over 1.8 billion. 1.8 billion, right? So one example I like to use is like Ethereum. We'll use them for example. Currently, tiny market cap, right? This is one. Do you think Ethereum is better than Raven? I think it is, right? At this point, if it only reaches a $500 million market cap, which to me, if Raven made it up that high, this is only a fraction of what Ravencoin did. So if at some point throughout these next 6 months, it only hits 500 million, that's still a 929% gain, right? Even more so if it reaches that market cap, which I think is possible, especially considering who's incentivized by that, right? It is popular in our world, in the proof of work world. Does have incentive from ASIC manufacturers to pump this thing. Again, there are reasons for this thing to pump on top of the fundamentals, right? So kind of have to remind yourself as to why you're doing this, what the possibilities are. Again, it's not going to happen to every coin. As a matter of fact, it's going to happen to a small fraction of coins, right? But you're playing a game of probability as to which ones it's likely to happen. So I'm looking at coins that have good fundamentals, good community, outside incentives, whether it's VCs, whether it's hardware manufacturers, market makers on these smaller exchanges. You have to look at those outside factors because they can play a factor into it. Like for me, that's a big reason I'm big into lithium. To me, a lot of similarities in timing with the releases of the ASICs with Cadena last cycle, which to me, we'll talk about it here in a moment, but I think that's a big reason it did what it did last cycle from the ASIC manufacturers, right? Because they were some of the ones that were definitely most incentivized for that coin to pump, okay? So that's just an example of types of things I look at when you're coming up with price predictions, right? Looking at what's happened previously, again, doesn't mean it's going to repeat. Some of them will, though. Some of these coins will do a 10x, 20x, 50x, 100x. Some of these will flop and go to zero, right? Some of the coins I purchased throughout this bear market have done just that, right? Especially these little small market cap coins out of the top 200. Anything can happen, right? So this is why you place your bets on those. And initially, what I tend to do is if I see one early, buy a little bag. That's my little 1%ers. As time goes on, maybe I get more bullish on it. Maybe start to DCA more, and that's how the kind of things tend to grow. Or maybe something happens. Man, I don't like this change. This is trash. Let me dump it. Kind of like what happened with the whole Radiant situation. The whole decisions with the entity and having them allowing to do all what they did. That's when I dumped it, and I'm super glad I did at that time. Okay, so just different things to consider there. Another good example on the tokenomics side is, because this is one I'm bullish on. I've mentioned the game Off the Grid quite a few times before. Their official token is the Guns token. So you would think like, okay, to me, they're definitely going to be the clear winner for Web3 games. It's definitely the most polished game, most heavily invested game. So you would think I would look at it and be like, oh, as soon as that token drop, buy it. That was the plan until we see the tokenomics of this thing, and they are some of the worst, right? So this is another one where you have to pay attention to the tokenomics, pay attention to the circuiting supply, because it's another one where like, okay, I'm bullish on it. I like the game. I played it. Man, it's only a $37 million market cap. This guy was talking about reaching 500 million will be easy. Let me buy a bag. The reason I'm pumping the brakes is because of the horrendous tokenomics. The fact that there's only a small amount of the actual supply in circulation. There's a 10 billion max supply. There's only 787 million tokens circulating. Okay, only 7% of the supply is out, which is kind of unusual, right? Typically on Genesis, even these like shitter coins, they'll release like 20%, X amount will go to the team, X amount will go to investors on launch, whatever. In this case, they kind of shitted on their investors, and this is another reason why I'm so iffy. Like, although right now, they're technically not going to have an unlock until September of 2025, which is going to be a hefty one. It'll be 6% of the freaking supply. My thing is, I kind of lost confidence with them following this plan, just because, again, any of these proof-of-stake coins, the tokenomics can change any given moment, right? And they actually did that, right? So I don't have full confidence that they're going to follow that. They actually pissed off a lot of their investors because literally last minute, they changed it. Okay, seed round investors were supposed to get 5% of their gun tokens unlocked on launch day, which they didn't, while strategic round investors were supposed to see 2% of their token unlocks on launch, which they didn't. According to the public gun white paper, the strategic round is seeing 0% of tokens unlocked on launch. The private A and B rounds have been granted the same. This means these groups' tokens won't be unlocked for at least a year because their tokens have a 12-month cliff with 18 months of vesting. Okay. So who's to say they don't decide to change it? But like, you know what? Let's dump a whole bunch of coins, right? Like, it's a lot of risk when there's such a small amount of the supply out. Okay. And at this point, if they're willing to shit on their investors like that, who's to say they don't change things, right? In reality, I hope they do follow it, because that'll kind of give fair chance to everybody. It's hard to say, because also the way the tokens are going to unlock is going to be a little bit different also, just because they're going to have all these tournaments. They're going to unlock during the gameplay also. So there's a lot of those dynamics. So it's not as simple as looking at the market cap and looking at the potential there, right? Especially with such a small amount of supply out. I would have been way more comfortable if they would have just unlocked those coins. If they would have had actually 20% of the supply out and had a more linear progression through. Okay, but when I see stuff like that, it's like, ugh. At the end of the day, though, like we've seen, though, sometimes that doesn't even matter, though, right? It just, the Ponzi-nomics can freaking take off and it can go through the roof, right? So this is one we'll be watching. But for me, definitely needs to go lower, right? We'll see. We'll see how we play it. But as time goes on, things like that are what make me iffy, right? Because we see a lot of these launches. And again, for you guys who look into these new coins, look at coins that are like airdrop farming, all those things, what do they all typically hit and launch? They try to hit that 1 billion FTV, right? So this is why it's important to look at the FTV, because although the market cap is 37 million, if all those coins were unlocked, essentially, your FTV would be 481 million. Okay, so this is why it's a better metric to look at FTV on new coin launches. That's your best metric there, right? But it's just crazy, right? So we'll see. We're going to follow it. We'll pay attention to it. But when I look at things like that, it kind of makes me iffy. But it's not limited to just proof-of-stake coins or Web3 gaming coins. It's also in the proof-of-work world, right? For specifically, we'll mention these with Deepin, right? Which are kind of a hybrid of the two. These are kind of different, but you do got to pay attention to these things. On CMC, quite a few coins, it does have a token unlock section, so you can kind of see it in real time and pay attention to them, right? So even coins like GeoNet, for example, which is one of my favorites, they do have quite a bit of unlocks coming, and it's good to look at this toggle also, right? Small unlocks. So you look at it like, okay, every month, 1.1% of the supply is going to get unlocked, which is hefty, bros. And you can see here on the chart, like how much it starts to accelerate. And then it's even heftier when you're looking at the smaller unlocks also, right? There's quite a few. I mean, here in just this like 2-week span, look at how many unlocks are coming. Okay, you got to pay attention to these things. It's going to give you an idea of kind of what to expect in the future. And just because this is happening also doesn't mean it's endgame. Again, it's a narrative, it's overall progress, and it depends on who's getting the allocation. Is it team funds? Is it investors? Those are who you got to worry about more than anything. So you can look at the allocations, whether it's just mining, ecosystem, vendor, investor. So like these rounds are the ones you want to follow, and these are some of the heftier ones. These are 0.91%. So these are all things to factor in, right? And it's kind of a necessity with a lot of these Deepin coins, and a lot of people gave Wingbit shit about their tokenomics, but in reality the team does need to get incentivized here, because they are the ones making the deals, bringing that revenue in. Again, without those deals, your data is worthless, right? They are the ones grinding, making those deals happen, and bringing value to the network. Okay, doesn't mean it should be crazy, right? But understand those things, right? So the tokenomics here are going to be vastly different from your typical like fairly launched proof of work coin, right? Another good example of this is with Demo. Demo also has quite a few. You can see here, especially over time, it starts getting crazy farther down the road, right? Initially, it's not too bad. When you look at the unlocks, if you look at it, there's currently no major unlocks anytime soon until you click the small unlocks. And this is where it kind of changes, because every month there is a nearly 1%, right? It's under 1%, 0.96. This small unlocks thing is for looking for things greater than 1%, right? So they're right under that threshold, so that's why it's kind of sneaky. And it is a good amount, and it's every month. The 11th of every month at 9.57 million demo get unlocked, right? On top of some of these others, right? So definitely just things you want to pay attention to, you want to look at, especially when you're valuing it by its current market cap, right? If you want to get super in depth, you can plug those numbers into this overall calculator to kind of give you an idea, kind of give you a ballpark how much of an effect it's going to have. Just depends on how crazy you want to get. But understand those things. Even Ethereum. Ethereum's another one that does have unlocks, although a lot of the big ones are currently done, right? If we look at the investor unlocks, you can see them here. The last big one was July 25th, 2024, and that was a 3 million token unlock. And you can see the last one coming up is going to be July 25th of this year, right? So that one's coming, 400,000. It's still a good amount, but definitely not what it was before, right? As far as ecosystem and treasury, the team and treasury is done. There are ecosystem unlocks. Last ones coming out, same thing, July 25th, right? So those are just about done also, right? So just keep those things in mind. Just because it's proof of work, it's mineable, doesn't mean there's not going to be VCs or monies or things to kind of worry about, right? Things to kind of look at, things to consider, okay? And as we look at another consideration are like the pumpamentals, right? Who's pumping this thing? Why is it pumping? And this is the thing, you have to be a realist, right? I get it. People want to be big on the fundamentals. And yes, that definitely is a reason. But like an example with Cadena, right? It's one, if you are into proof of work, if you're into fast, scalable proof of work projects, prior to Caspa, this kind of was it. Look at the crazy price action they had last cycle, right? So if we look at the numbers in October 2021, they were under $2, right? A month later, going up to $25. Insane, right? What was the reason for that? Speculation. In my belief, ASIC manufacturers being incentivized in order for them to sell more units. Obviously a combination of things, right? But again, similar thing. It's not even like, again, it was a $10 million market cap or something. October 28th, early October, $300 million market cap, right? Not too far off from some of the coins we're looking at right now. Went all the way to 4 billion just in the matter of weeks, bros. That's how crazy shit can get in the bull market. I understand those things. It's narratives, it's pumpamentals. A lot of times those things are more important, unfortunately, right? It kind of sucks to say that, but that's the truth of it, right? Doge is another one. It was during that GameStop hype, if you guys remember any of that, the Elon hype. That's what triggered all of this, right? Same thing. March 2021, it was a nickel. Fast forward a few months, freaking 70-something cents. And again, same thing. It wasn't a $10 million market cap coin. In March 2021, it was already $7.5 billion. Went past 80 billion in weeks. Crazy, right? On the narrative front, same thing. Like Axie Infinity was another good example. The whole gaming thing went freaking bad shit crazy. Okay, summer of 2021, under $4. Let's call it even $4. By November, during the peak of the hype of the gaming thing, $150. Okay, market cap went over 10 billion. Okay, insane. 200 million in June 2021 to 10 billion. From hype, pumpamentals, Ponzinomics of the gaming aspect. A lot of those things, right? Sandbox was another one. Sandbox, their hype was Meta changing, or Facebook changing their name to Meta. So what happened? All the metaverse coins went crazy. Okay, it happened towards sometime the end of October. And it led to their crazy run, right? Again, a narrative thing, just narrative. Okay, sometimes we want to look at fundamentals and we want to be purists and we want to say like this coin has the best fundamentals. That's why this coin will do well. Not all the time. Right, and I think one of the best examples of that is like Chainlink. Arguably, fundamentally, one of the most important coins in crypto. If Chainlink went away, all that TVL we saw in Ethereum go to fucking zero. Extremely important coin. Yet this is one that did not do too well. Why? So although it's extremely important, what reason do normies really have to buy this thing? Are they buying something on that chain? No, it's speculation. And even then, again, this coin is extremely important. If it went away, and at this point it wouldn't even only affect Ethereum. At this point they've interacted with damn near everything. It would be massive if something happened with them. And even with all that, how important that coin is, chances are we'll see how high it goes, but I think there's a lot of coins that will definitely outperform it. Okay, so fundamentals aren't going to be everything. They are definitely a big factor. Obviously, good fundamentals is the base layer. You want to get up there, but sadly, a lot of it is marketing, pumpamentals, who's talking about that, and who's incentivized to pump that coin, right? So in reality, kind of summing everything up, which coins are break the previous all-time high? It's really hard to say, right? We are playing a game of probability. I'm personally placing my bets into a lot of those coins. I'm placing my bet into a lot of narrative coins that this is going to be their first bull market, just because, again, the upside could be massive here. It's totally up to you. You got to determine on what you value. Just understand with a lot of more of these legacy coins, especially if they're not getting utilized, don't be surprised to see more stuff like this. Okay, it's just understanding those dynamics, understanding, unfortunately, how a lot of this game is played. It's going to factor in. Think about these things, guys. Again, open your eyes beyond just the basics. Look at the tokenomics, look at the inflation rates, look at token unlocks, look at the hype of these coins. Like, who's talking about it? Who's incentivized for this thing to pump, right? A lot of different factors, but just totally understand that just because it hit that previous price point doesn't mean it's going to make or break it. Sometimes, in some cases, it may get nowhere near it, as we've seen in some of these cases. Okay. Let me know in the comments, guys. What do you guys think? Do you guys kind of agree, disagree? Do you guys see something similar? Let me know in the comments. Please comment, like, and subscribe, guys. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I am out.